Hello again. It's a snowy day, so I'm making another video for you. After you do two-step equations, when you solve those, sometimes we have even more than two steps. Do you remember when we simplified expressions, we had to use the distributive property? Sometimes we have to do that first and then simplify and then combine like terms and then we solve for the equation. So let's try some examples of that. Make sure you're writing these notes while I do. Make sure whatever I write, you write. And then this is when you're done. So the first thing I want you to do is notice it says simplify each side of the equation as much as possible. Okay, so we always simplify everything first. Use the, is it going to work? Distributive, I'm trying a new thing here, so property to remove any parentheses. So make sure you write that in the spaces. Use the distributive property to remove the parentheses first. We know that. We can't just start combining like terms until the parentheses are gone. Then, after you've removed the parentheses, you have to combine, I bet you can guess, any like terms. Like terms have the same variable and exponent or constant, okay? Let's keep that in mind. And remember, this is the next part down here that you need to write in your notes. Always show work for each step, and there's a reason. So at some point, you're going to get the wrong answer. I mean, we all do. So if you get the wrong answer, we won't know where. You won't know where. So you must show your work so you can see where it is that you might have made a mistake. That's all. So let's take a look at this first one here. I'll do a little drawing. Don't forget, when there's a number outside of the parentheses, it means 4 is being multiplied by the x and by the 5. So we're going to just draw our arrows so we don't forget. 4 is going to multiply by the x, and then 4 will multiply by the 5. So 4 times x is 4x. Let me see if I can go to my shapes now here. And 4 times 5 is 20. So your first step should say 4x plus 20. Then you rewrite everything else that you haven't used. And I bet you can see that there are some like terms there, right? So let's see if we can slide this down even more. I know that 20 and 3, negative 3 actually, are like terms because they're both constant. So I can combine those. And 20 minus 3 is 17. So my simplified version, let's see if I can get rid of this. My simplified version is 4x plus 17 equals 37. Now I have a two-step equation. You already know how to do this step, but let's try this anyway. Make sure you have everything here. I'm going to scroll down. So this next part, you already know this, but let's write it again. Always isolate the variable, meaning get the variable by itself so we know how much one of those variables is worth, and always do that by using inverse operations. So if you were to look at this two-step equation, remember in the last video I made, we said we always identify the addition and subtraction first. It's like the opposite order of operations. This time we're moving up from the bottom of the order of operations. So that means I see addition, and the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 17. And when I do that, please make sure you're writing this in your notes. When I do that, I get 4x equals 20. Now I have a nice straightforward one-step equation. 4 times x is 4x, that's what that means, and the opposite of multiplication is division. So I would show with a fraction bar division of 4 on both sides, and I would end up with x equals 5. But I hate to say this, we often make mistakes, so we always have to check afterwards. So once you have this, let's move down to the next part. The last part here says check your solution. Always check, even if it's the kind you do in your head. Just check it to make sure you did it right, because a lot of times it's not right. People are just like, well, I did it. No, you have to check to make sure that that solution works. Okay, so now we have our original. We always start with our original equation. And we're going to substitute in. Do you remember what x is worth? That's what you were substituting in. In this case, x was worth 5. So I replaced the x with 5. Now, I don't distribute this time because sometimes people make mistakes. Simplify everything as much as you can starting inside the parentheses. 5 plus 5 is 10. 4 times 10 minus 3 should be 37, but let's check. So 4 times 10 is 40, and 40 minus 3 is indeed 37. Remember how I showed you always have to show that last step. Does 37 equal 37? Yes, give it a check. Now this is a lot of steps, and we won't always ask you to show all these steps, but you must be able to show all the steps. Once you have all of this, go ahead and go to the next page. Okay, so these are your 2 practice problems, but first of all, I'm going to move myself here. I'm going to, that doesn't look very good. I'm going to do these first 2 with you so you get some more examples of what to do. The first one is actually pretty straightforward. I bet you could do this on your own, but let's just practice anyway. I'm going to draw this is the distributive property, right? Because I have a number outside of the parentheses. So I'm going to multiply 3 times x, and then I'm going to multiply 3 times 2. And I always use the arrows, not because you mathematically need to, but because otherwise I'll forget to multiply everything in the parentheses. So after I do that, let's see. Once I get that done, the next thing I want to do is actually multiply through. So 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 2 is 6. Make sure you have this next step. 3x plus 6 equals 18. Now I have a basic 2-step equation. I look for addition and subtraction first. I'm adding 6, so the inverse operation of addition is subtraction, and I need to subtract 6 on both sides. Okay. Once I get done with that, I'm left with 3x equals 12. 3x means multiplication, so the inverse operation of multiplication is division, and I'm going to divide both sides by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. That means I have 1x left, and I know that equals 4. Done and done. And I'm not asking you to check this, but let's just do it in our heads anyway to make sure it works. 4 gets substituted in for x. So what is 4 plus 2? Because we're going to do things in parentheses first. 4 plus 2 is 6. Now I multiply 6 times 3. 6 times 3 is 18. Does 18 equal 18? Yes, it does. Very nice. Okay, this next one, number 2, is a little bit trickier. Let me do purple this time. If you notice, outside of the parentheses is not just a 2, it's a negative 2. Please circle it. Do a better job circling it than I did because you can't even tell it's a 2. And I'm going to draw my arrow to my first term in parentheses, and then I'll draw my arrow to the second term in my parentheses. That way I won't forget what I'm multiplying. Now, remember this. This is the part we get so tricked up on. 8 is not being multiplied by anything. Nothing. Only negative 2 is. So we're going to leave 8 alone for now. We're just going to bring it down. So let's just drag this on down here, if I can. So we bring down the 8 minus, now remember, negative 2 times 3y is negative 6y. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10, and this all equals 0. Okay, so now we have to look for any like terms. Sorry about that. The only like terms I see are 8 and negative 10, so we can combine those because they're constants. 8 minus 10 is negative 2, so we're going to scroll on down. So now I have negative 6y minus 2 equals 0. We have a 2-step equation now that we've simplified everything, and that means we need to look for addition and subtraction. And I see that I'm subtracting 2, so the opposite of subtraction is addition. So I now know I need to add 2 to both sides, and we did here. And when we get done, the negative 2 and the positive 2 cancel out, and I'm left with negative 6y equals 2. This is where people are going to get really tricked because you're dividing both sides now by negative 6, but you're thinking, but that's going to give me a fraction. And yes, sometimes you're going to get fractions. So when I get done here, dividing both sides by negative 6, all that I want you to do is look at this and say, I know 2 is less than negative 6 as a number. The absolute value of it is less. So that means I'm going to get a small fraction, and I can simplify the 2 and the 6 so I get a fraction that's usable. Look at that. Y equals negative 2/6 or negative 1/3. In this case, if you're going to check this in your head, please bear with me. If I take negative 1/3 and I substitute it in here for y, it actually works out really nice. Because if I multiply 3 times 1/3, I get 1. A third of 3 is just 1. So I have negative 1 plus 5. Well, negative 1 plus 5 is 4. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. 8 and negative 8 makes 0, so it does check. Please pause the video and take some time with your partner to practice the rest of the equations. Pause this, please. Please pause, try the problems, and now I'm going to show you the answers. So pause first. Now I'm going to scroll down. Well, look at this. I guess I didn't want to give you too much here. Okay, so these are the two solutions for 3 and 4. Check your work, and if you need to fix everything, then please put this on pause and copy down the correct solution. Also make a note that maybe I'm having a hard time with this, so you can ask questions. You need to understand it because you know that that's one of the skills that you have to have. All right, the last two, the next two I should say, here are the solutions for these. And I'm going to scroll on down to the last two. And I'm going to move my face so you can actually see the answers. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but this answer over here is 1 1/2. Oh, big error I just noticed right now. Do not do this one. You cannot do this one. Okay? And you can't do 7 and you can't do 8. So you only had to do 1 through 6.